Astro is a 4 times improvement over NextJS in this example right out of the box. How cool is that? Astro 1.0 is here, and with it is the opportunity for us as NextJS developers to reuse the components that we have in NextJS in Astro, but have much more control over what code goes to the client, and the result is much faster sites. It's the island architecture brought to life for React right now. Let's jump right into it. All right, so here's the Astro homepage, and it's got this awesome little call out here. And it talks about how you have 138 KB of JavaScript going to the client with Next.js and the 7.6 KB with Astro. And the question is, does that actually result in a faster page? So the first thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to actually put Next.js and Astro head to head and see how the performance stacks up. And then, hoping that that gets you excited about Astro, we'll then go into how to take a practical Next.js application and turn it into an Astro app. All right, so first thing to do is look at the app that we are going to use as our test bed. So what's happening here is we are taking the different types of the Pokemon, we are then grouping by that type, we're then sorting all of the Pokemon on that particular type and getting the overall number, whatever. It's just a whole bunch of calculations. And it effectively represents a load test of these different frameworks. Okay, so let's go over and take a look at the source code. So in the GitHub repository that is linked to in the description, this video down below, there is all of this code is available to you for free, as all these videos are. And what we're looking at right now is the Pokemon Next static directory. And what we're going to do is we are going to compare Next.js running in static mode to Astro. The reason we're going to do that is because Astro is by default static. So this is a great way to compare apples to apples. We're going to do it all at build time. And so we're going to see these frameworks at their best and be able to compare those two. Okay, so let me look a little bit closer at the code that we've got going on here. So I've got our index page over here, and it goes and gets a bunch of Pokemon from a local file. It then uses static props. That's why we're going to have a static page. And it takes that set of Pokemon and it passes it through as props. That comes over here into home. That then gets sent on to the Pokemon list as a prop. And then over here in our Pokemon list, we do all of this crazy logic to figure out like how, you know, all the Pokemon stack up and all that sort of stuff. And what this code over here amounts to isn't really anything practical. It amounts to a lot of load, right? So it's just a very concise way of simulating having an app that has a complex UI library, complex UI components that may do a lot of work like graphs or whatever, have complex business logic or stores. So folks might say to me, okay, but if I were to go and just take all of this code here and then pop it over here into the server, yes, this particular app would be faster. And that's absolutely true. But when you have an application that has complex business logic and it's scattered all over the place, it's really hard to just make one change that's going to go make the app that much faster. So I think this actually represents a pretty good test. You may not believe me, but you know, we'll see. Okay, so all right. Let us go and build out an Astro app that does this. So I'm going to go and bring up another terminal. And in here, I'm going to use this npm init command. Now this npm init command is going to use the Astro init. We're going to give it the template specification for React. Astro is super cool. You can do React components, you can do Vue components, you can do Preact components, and you can do them all on the same page, which is awesome. And we are going to call our app Pokemon Astro static, right? So is Pokemon Next static, we're going to have Pokemon Astro static. Let's go build that out. Do you want me to do the dependencies? Yes, I do. I do not want you to make a GitHub repo out of that. I do want to be relaxed about my TypeScript. That's not the point of all this. And let's go see what we've got. So I'm going to go into the Pokemon Astro static directory. I'm going to do yarn dev, and we'll see what we've got. Go and copy that. Oops. And then over here, I'm going to stop my current server because it's on port 3000, and I'll do yarn dev over on the Astro side. I'll copy that and bring up a new tab, pop that in there, and there we go. Okay, so we've got an Astro app, placeholder stuff. So let's go over into our Pokemon Astro static and see what this is. Well, we've got components. We got that counter component here, basically just a simple counter with plus and minus, along with its CSS. And then it's got the page, which is a .astro file. So .astro is a templating language, very similar to JSX. And what it allows you to do is just do things like, for example, bring in React components and you just invoke them. Like, here you go. So you got the counter, and we're saying that it actually is visible on the client, which means that the code is going to run over there, but it feels a lot similar to JSX. Okay, so I'm going to go and take some code from our original Next, and I'll just bring it in almost 100% unadulterated. So I'll bring in the types first. That's going to have our Pokemon type. I'll bring in the Pokemon list component. And I'm just going to change the location of types. That's all I'm going to do. And then I'm going to bring Pokemon JSON in. Also put it in components, whatever, it's fine. It's got to go somewhere. And let's see, I'm going to delete the counter stuff. Don't need that. And I'll go over to this Astro, and I will remove this import stuff. In between these dashes is any JavaScript you want to run. And let's see, I'll remove all of this header stuff. Don't need that. And I'll remove that. And now I'm just going to bring in that Pokemon. So I'll do import Pokemon. This is the list of Pokemon from the components directory and that Pokemon.json. So now I've got my Pokemon. It's that easy. And then I'm going to bring in our Pokemon list from the components directory. And then I'm just going to wire that up. So let's put that in there. And Pokemon. And save. And there we go. Let's try it out. Let's see. Okay. Ta-da! How fast is that? That's awesome. Okay, so let us go now and compare these two kind of build for build. So again, Astro is going to build static files and Next is going to build static files. If you don't know about static files are the fastest way to render a page. It basically means that you're pre-rendering the page. You're building all the HTML and then you're going to store it off on something like S3, and then accessing that is basically as easy as just making a request to S3 and bang, there you go. So it's really, really fast. And it's going to be NextJS at its fastest. It's going to be Astro at its fastest. We're going to compare the two. Okay, so on our Astro side, we're going to do yarn build. And then we're going to do yarn preview. All right, so that's what that looks like on localhost 3000. And now we're going to do the same thing over on Pokemon Next static. So we're going to do yarn build over here. And this is going to build a static version of that homepage. And then we're going to do port equals 3001. We want to run them at the same time. And then do yarn and then start. And then that's going to run that built version of the code, as opposed to yarn dev, which would run it in dev mode. All right, let's go over here to 3001. Okay, so now let's get some numbers. I'm going to open up the inspector. I'm going to go over here to the network panel. And I'm going to hit refresh a bunch of times. And we're going to look down here. So we're getting a load time around, say, 40 milliseconds, 40, 50 milliseconds on average. Okay, so let's go over into our localhost for Astro. Again, we'll do the network. No throttling again. And we'll hit refresh and watch to see how we're doing over here. Load time is in the 7 to 8 millisecond range. Astro is a 4 times improvement over Next.js in this example right out of the box. How cool is that? All right, so why is this actually happening? Well, I've filtered it down to just JS here, and there's no JS coming out of Astro, right? There's nothing that's running on the client. So if I go, for example, into view page source here, you can see that the page source is literally just the HTML. That's it. We've literally just rendered a static page. Now, if I look over here at the Next.js side, there is a ton of JavaScript coming down, even in this built mode, even on a static page, right? And when we look at the view page source, what we can see is, yes, we're getting all of that HTML at the top here, but we're also getting the entirety of that Pokemon.json file that we sent to that component.
What does this do? It sucks in air.
It's definitely sucking.
Why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because of the way that Next.js and frankly React work kind of by default nowadays. And that's that there's a rehydration cycle of the app on the client. So what happens is on the client, you get all the app source code, and then you need to rerun the app to create the running state that you had on the server. You have to recreate it on the client. And so you need all of the data that you had on the server. So that's why there's that big ball of data in the HTML. That's then passed on to the app as its pre-initialized state. And then you rerun that whole component. So in our example, that means that that huge use memo calculation that we did over in the Pokemon list, this big boy down here is getting run both on the server at build time, which is great. So we did that yarn build. That's when this is getting run on our build system, right? And then we store off that HTML, but it also has that big payload of data in it. And then on the client, it's actually getting run live on the client. So that means that the performance of your site is highly dependent on the performance of the specific device that your site is running on. And that could be somebody's cheap commodity cell phone. In fact, actually, let's try that out. Let's go over to Chrome again, and we'll bring up the Performance Insights page. This is kind of new. This is cool. And we're over on 3001. So this is Next.js. And we'll do a little throttling. We'll say that our network is bad. We're on slow 3G. And we'll say that we got a bad phone. So like 4 times the slowdown. Now this is a Intel Mac 2019. It's a pretty decent machine. So we're going to slow it down and we're going to see how that looks. Okay. So let's do the measure the page load. This is honestly awesome tool. It just came out in Chrome just recently. I'm loving on this. Okay, and these times aren't great. We're talking about time to interactive of 6.69 seconds. It's crazy. All right, let's try it over here and then do the same sort of thing. We'll go to Performance Insights, pick exactly the same options. Slow 3G and a CPU throttling of 4 times. Measure the page load of our Astro page. And we are in the green. A 2.12 second page load time, which is hella better than a 6.69 page load time. In fact, again, that's a 3 times improvement for the Astro page over the Next.js page. And this is for reals, right? This is actually something that you might actually do. I mean, obviously not this example in particular, but I mean, this is a for real speed differential. So when it comes to this claim of less JavaScript on the page, that can make a dramatic difference in the performance of your site. You may say to me, oh, come on, Jack, this is not a fair comparison because, I mean, every site is going to have some interactive elements to it. So if I were to bring in an interactive element into this Astro page, it would be just as bad as the Next.js stuff. Okay, let's try that. Let's actually do that. So I'm going to go over here to our Visual Studio Code, and we'll go and add a little bit of interactivity here. It's not going to be much, but we're going to do this. So over in the Astro static, I'm going to create a new file, call it login.tsx, and it's going to have a login function. So I export a default function called login that returns a login button. And that login button is going to have an on click, which is going to say alert, login, right? Ridiculous. And we're going to bring that onto our page. So bring it in index Astro, and then we'll import it. And then I'll include it. And let's try this out. So first I'm going to go into dev mode. So am I running on Astro? Yeah, there you go. Okay. I'll run it in dev mode and we'll make sure that it works. And now we can see our login button. But when I click on it, nothing happens. And the reason is that, again, by default, Astro thinks that whatever that component is has no client-side JavaScript that's associated with it. But it does, right? So if I were to go, for example, in page source, we would see that it is just that one button and that's it. So the way that we tell it to actually do something on the client is you say, cool, client visible. So this is going to load that login code when that actual element is visible on the screen. Hit save. And now I hit login and it works. Ta-da! Cool. So what's really happening here is that I am now in control of the JavaScript that goes out to the page. I get to decide which components are client-side interactive. It is the fundamental essence of the island's architecture. We have a sea of static content here, but we have little islands of interactivity. In this case, that is our login. Okay, let us go and take our login and put it over in our Next.js. So I'll do source over here, components, and add login, and then add that to our index page. Login. Okay, now I've got to go build each one of these. I got some pushback on my recent video about how I compared dev to dev. Well, let's compare build to build. Okay, so let's build out the Astro version first. And then we'll do that preview. And now we'll do the same thing over on the next side. First I'll go make sure it works. So port 3001 yarn dev. And I'll hit login. Yep, works just fine. Cool. Okay. So now let's do our static build. And again, we'll use port 3001 yarn start. And I'll hit refresh. Okay, perfect. Looks good. Now let's get those numbers. Okay, so I'm going to go back over here to the network. I'm going to make sure that our throttling is off. And I'm going to hit refresh a bunch of times and still seeing numbers in about the mid 40s. No appreciable difference, right? We've added the tiniest little component. We wouldn't go and see any difference from that on the next side. Again, what we're seeing on the next side in terms of the performance impact is really just the nexus of having a lot of React code go down to the page, the React library itself, and then all of that computation that I'm doing now on the client side with that use memo and all that. Okay, now let's go and do the same thing over on our Astro side. So no throttling again, and I'll hit refresh. And again, down at the 8-10 millisecond range. So even with this 135K of React library, what's happening is that the React library is getting parsed, but all we're doing is rendering this one little button. So in terms of the overhead for the hydration and everything else, it's absolutely minimal. So that's why we're seeing almost no performance impact from adding this additional code to the page. Super cool. Well, I hope I've intrigued you about Astro and you want to try it out for yourself. So what we're going to do next is we are going to do a more practical example and convert a Next.js app that has a bunch of the features that you would expect to test when it comes to Next.js. And we're going to convert each one of those to Astro and see how we go. But before we do that, I would like to ask you to click on the like button if you like this video and click on the subscribe button if you're really digging on this video. And thank you so much for all the subscribes that we've gotten recently. We're up to almost 70K subscribers. It's nuts. I'm loving this. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go back into our code and take a look at our project. So I'm going to close up all these. We're done with this part of the show. And we're going to move on to our Pokemon Next directory and our Pokemon Next example. So Pokemon Next. And here we're going to do yarn dev. And we'll take a look at 3000 this time. So this is our Pokemon Next server. And we're getting an error because we don't have access to this localhost 8080 server that has Pokemon JSON on it. So where's that? So that's over in the Pokemon directory. There is a bunch of static data that we're going to use kind of as an analog for a microservice, right? So I'll go and create another terminal here, and I'll go into that Pokemon directory, and I'll do port equals 8080 mpx serve. And that's just going to serve out the contents of that directory. I'll go back over to our 3000, hit refresh, and ta-da, microservice is alive, therefore app is alive. Awesome. So what we're looking at here is a nice little app. It's got, these cute little Pokemon cards here. It's got a header and a layout. You can type in things like sour and get just the Pokemon that have sour in the name. You can click on a Pokemon and get all of the information about that. That's on its own route. So it's a detail route. And then there's one more thing you can do is you can go API search and search for a given keyword like sour, and you get back JSON, and that powers the search page, which is fully dynamic. So you can type in something like sour and you get all of the sours and all that. So pretty cool. And what it basically demonstrates is the kind of things that you would want to do with Next.js. So it's got layouts. It's got the ability to have detail pages. It's got an API. It has a page that uses that API. So we're trying to stress test everything and make sure that we can do all of the stuff we could in Next.js with Astro. Let's find out. Okay. Oh, also before I get into it, I should note that this is all on Tailwind. So we're going to need Tailwind first as well. Okay. So let's go and build our Astro site. So we'll go back up a level and we'll do npm. And yeah, okay, so we're just going to do the same thing, but we're going to call this just Astro, right? So Pokemon Astro, we have Pokemon Next, now we're going to have Pokemon Astro. Do we want to install npm dependencies? I say yes. Do I make it a Git repo? No. And I want to be relaxed about my TypeScript, man. I want to be relaxed. Okay, so we're going to go into our Pokemon Astro. And you would expect when we do yarn dev to get that exact same thing that we did before. Let's do it. No, not found on that, of course, because we're in the detail page. Cool. Hello, React, rockin'. Okay. So let's get something out of the way already. Let's get Tailwind in there. Obviously, that's going to be a huge piece of thing to set up. So I'm going to do npx Astro add Tailwind. So it's going to ask me some things. Do I want to make a change to my configuration file for Astro to go and add Tailwind and then bring it in as an integration? I do. Do I want to bring in the development? Do I want to bring in the development dependency? I think I should. Yes. All right. And do I want to make a minimal Tailwind config file? Yes, I do. Okay. So there we go. That's it. That is all I need to do. And if I were to go and do yarn dev again, I think probably change from like whatever that was to like a, yeah. Okay. So we've gone to like an Arial. That's about as much as you're going to see from that. Okay, so that's one of the things that's really cool here, right? So we got this Astro integration stuff that makes it really easy to bring in things like Tailwind. And there's a bunch of different plugins. There's a whole kind of ecosystem around this. Okay, so one of the first things I want to do is bring in the little Pokemon card, right? We want to replicate the Pokemon cards. So I'm going to go over to that Pokemon Next and bring in the components for the Pokemon card. And go over here to components and paste that in there. And I'm going to get rid of the counter because we don't need that. And then I'm going to go to pages and we're going to get rid of that counter stuff up there. And we really don't need any of that. We're going to change that to a layout. And let's see. So that's okay, cool. So how do we go and get some data? Well, we go and use fetch, right? So we're going to have res and we're going to await the fetch from that localhost 8080 Pokemon.json. That's going to give us back a response, and then we'll get the list of Pokemon. All right, so from there, let's just do for the moment just json.stringify and give it our Pokemon. And there you go. I had to reboot the server, but yeah, little things like that. Okay, so we're making that fetch, and we are bringing that Pokemon in. And I got to tell you, in comparison to, say, the NextJS version of this, let's go take a look at that. So index, yeah. Okay. So we have get server-side props. It's a little clunkier, right? So you got the Astro file over here. This is what we want to run at the top. And then there you go. Okay. So let's go and bring in our Pokemon card. From that Pokemon card, I'm going to put the import at the top. There, Jack. Be nice. Be nice. And I will use Pokemon. And then I will, yeah, sure. I will go and do that Pokemon card with the Pokemon. Cool. And I'm just going to slice that down to the top 10. And in fact, I had a bit of a different layout here. So I had like a div in there. It's got some columns. Yeah, I'll take that in there. Cool. And finish up that div. And it's class instead of class name. Let's give it a go. Whoa! That was fast. Cool. All right. So now let's go and wrap that in an anchor tag. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Thank you, GitHub. And wrap that up. A little messy, but okay. And now if I click on that, we get a not found. That's fine because we haven't actually implemented on that yet. All right, looking pretty good. But we don't have a layout, though. We don't have a header. So the way that I'm going to do that, I'm not actually going to bring in, I've got a layout component over here. But what I want to do is show you how to use Astro for something like this. So I'm going to go and just copy the JSX. And then I'm going to use an Astro file. So instead of a TSX file, I'm going to use an Astro file. So I'll say layout.astro and paste that in there. We're going to change that class name to class. And we're going to change our next link to href. And then in here, instead of children, we're going to say slot. And that's how you do children in the Astro context. And this is the default slot. So if you have the layout wrapping some children, it goes into slot, but you can also do named slots, which is super cool. Okay, so I'm going to go over here, and the last thing I need to do is do this name thing. So that's going to come in as an Astro prop. So I'm going to do astro.props and then say name. And so if we have a name coming in, then use that. So now let's go over here into our index, and I'm going to bring in our layout. So layout from components layout.astro. I have to add that extension. That's a little weird. One would think, if you're in Astro, right, that should be default, but whatever. Okay, so name equals Jack. We'll just drop that in there just to make sure that that name thing works. And then we'll do layout, and we'll make that a little prettier. Hit save. Okay, looks pretty good. I got my name in there, and if I take that name out, it goes away. Let's see. Yeah, nice. Awesome. Okay, cool. So let us continue on. Let us go into this detail page and see how that works. So now it's about routing, right? We want to figure out how routing works in our new Astro framework. So let's go into our pages directory and create a new folder called Pokemon. And within that, a new file called bracketid.astro. Very similar to how you might do it in Next. And what this is a parameterized route. And the parameter in this case is the ID. So we're going to bring in that layout like we had before. And we'll just wrap our thing in a layout. All right, so interesting issue here. So remember how I said that Astro is by default static. So it works kind of the same way that Next does when it comes to parameterized routes for static. What that means is you have to specify this getStaticPaths function in your component. So we're going to export an async function called getStaticPaths, and it's going to list all of the paths to Astro that we're going to support. So to get that, we need to have the list of all the Pokemon. So let's go get that, put that in there. And then for each Pokemon, you need to return an object. We're going to take that Pokemon object, and we are going to return an object, and that's going to say that we have the params, which is going to be the ID, with the Pokemon ID, but we need to convert it to a string, exactly like we need to do in Next.js. And then we have the props, and that's just going to be that Pokemon. So let's hit save and see how we do. So yeah, okay, cool. So now it knows all of the routes. We're just not actually doing anything with that Pokemon data. So the first thing we're going to do is get that Pokemon data from the Astro props. So Pokemon equals astro.props.pokemon. And then we're going to JSON stringify it, because that's my favorite thing to do when you don't know what's going on. Hit save, and there you go. Nice. All right, so we got all our data. Cool. Now we just need to format it. So let's go back over into our Next.js app, go into the same exact route, and we'll just go and grab all this stuff and see how it goes. So here we go. So grab all that and pop that in there and clean it up a little bit. So I got all those class names. Class, save, and let's see. Oh, style. Okay, we're gonna need to tweak that a little bit. So that becomes style grid template columns 1FR 1FR. Okay, yeah, looks pretty good. Holy moly! Well, it's bigger, but you know it's fine. So okay, I'm digging on this. This is good. I mean, it's got the right stuff. May not have exactly the right layout, but it's fine. Okay, I love it. Now the next thing we had in here was we had a search field. So let's go and implement on that search field. So go back over here to our regular index page on Next.js, and we'll bring in this form. We'll go over here to the index page in our Astro app, and we'll paste that in there. I'll put that at the top. Cool. And we're not going to use any of that on-chain stuff. Not going to use that class name. And we'll just leave that value currently at empty. And we'll see how we go. Okay, cool. Oh, nice. We have a field now. Okay, so if I hit sour, what we can see is we got this Q equals sour up there. So that's automatic. What that's done is the form tag has resubmit to the page. And now all we need to do is get that Q and then filter this list of Pokemon by that Q, and we're good to go. So the way that we get that Q is we do this astro.url.searchparams.get, get that Q, and now we're going to filter that Pokemon by that Q. And we'll get our filtered Pokemon. So then we'll just slice that off to be the top 10, hit save, and we are good. We're golden. Hit sour, and we're not golden. We're not good. So what's happening here? Well, if I go over here and I say, well, let's first off see if we're getting a good Q value there. So Q equals, and then Q. And let's see. So if I go over to my console, and I hit refresh a few times, I should see Q equals SAR a few times, and I do not, and that's the problem. So the problem is the static, right? So we automatically build this page as a static piece of HTML. And at the point when we build it, we don't have search params, right? We don't have Q equals SAR. This is a role for SSR. This is a server-side rendered functionality, because every time we get a request, we may have no queue, we may have a queue of a different value. So we need to do that computation at server-side time. And we can't do this statically. We could, I mean, you could hack it on the client. Let's not do that. Okay, and we really want to show how to make Astro do the SSR thing. That's really what the point of this is. So I'm going to go and get rid of that. And the way that we make Astro do SSR is we turn it into server as opposed to static by output. And then we add in an adapter. And an adapter can get you to things like Node or Dino. There's a bunch of different adapters. So we're going to do the Node ones. I'm going to do npx astro add and then Node. It's going to do a similar sort of thing like we did with Tailwind. So now it says, okay, do we want to bring in Astro.js node? We have Tailwind already. It's kind of cool, right? Showing us what it's going to do. And we're going to add in the output server. So not static. Now we're going to go SSR. And we're going to bring in that adapter for node. Do we want to do that? Heck yeah, I want to do that. And I would want to bring in that library too. Okay, cool. So let's see. Let's do yarn dev and see how we go. So yarn dev. All right, now we're back on 3000. Hit save. And there we go. Cool. So it's actually looking at that sour. All right, nice. We do IV. There we go. Of course, it's not actually setting that search value there. So let's go do that. So let's take that Q, put it in here for the value. There we go. IV. Cool. All right. Now, of course, the detail page does not work. And the reason for that is because in moving from the static model to the server model, we have lost the get static path stuff. So we no longer do that. We're going to render this detail page on the fly. That is a disadvantage when it comes to Astro. You can't per route decide that some routes are server-side rendered and other routes are statically generated. So SSR versus SSG. So in Next.js, you can do that. In Astro, you cannot. So I'm going to go over here and we'll tweak this one so that now we no longer do the static paths. We instead go and get the list of Pokemon. And that comes back as, I guess, all Pokemon. And then within that, we just want to find the Pokemon that we care about. So I'll bring in a quick find piece of code there. That's going to go and find from the params, the ID for that Pokemon. And there you go. Hit save. And there you go. Ivysaur. Nice. And the layout's good. I don't know. You tell me. Comment section down below. Tell me what I did wrong. Oh, and one more thing. Okay, so let's see. So if I go to here, I want to have Bulbasaur be up there. So let's go do that. So I'm going to go here and name and say Pokemon.name. Cool. Okay, great. Yeah, nice. All right, now the last thing we want to do is implement on that search page. So the first thing we need to do is implement a search API. So how do we do that? Well, it's very, very similar to our old friend Next.js. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go create a pages directory called API. And within that, I am going to create a new file called search.ts. Hip tip, you can't use TSX here. You can now use JS or TS. You can't use TSX. It's a little thing. Who knows? All right, now I'm noticing I haven't actually done types here, and it's actually still working, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go bring in types from that source. I'm going to go and add this to the source directory. So there you go. Got that types in there. All right, so let's go take a look over at our Pokemon card. Okay, so let's just go back up a directory, hit types. Yeah, cool. All right, good. Now let's go over here to our search.ts. Wow, it's being really lax, I guess, when it comes to TS. I don't care. Import doesn't work. But it is very, very relaxed. All right, now I'm going to bring in the code for this, and I apologize for that. Sometimes I do this copy and paste stuff, but basically we need a get function. It's going to give us a request. We get that Pokemon type. We're going to do our usual fetch of that local endpoint. That's going to give us back our list of Pokemon. We're then going to go and do this kind of nasty, a little bit nasty thing here where we go in and get the second item off the request. And that's actually the actual request. I couldn't figure out a better way to do that, but here we go. So from there, we get our search params, we get our queue, and then we respond with some JSON. Okay, so let's try this out. So I'm going to go back over to our app, hit API, search, queue equals sour. Hey, got it on the first time. So I've done this a couple of times. Sometimes it doesn't work on the first time. Sometimes it does. All right, we'll go over now and build our search page. So this is basically going to be a completely dynamic page. That's kind of what I wanted to show here. I want to show us having an API, and I want to show us having a completely dynamic page. Like, for example, if I go back over here, so this page is basically all SSR. When it comes over, there's only HTML. There's nothing on the page that has any client-side interactivity. Go over here, same thing. What I want to show is how to do an island of interactivity, which would be this search page. So I'm going to go and create a new route under pages called search.astro. And again, I'm going to bring in that layout. All right, and do hello. And do search. And now I want to create a completely dynamic search page component. So I'm going to go over here to components. I'm going to create a search page .tsx file, pop in my React code. I apologize again for just doing that copy and paste, but so this is not particularly unique code. So we've got use state and use effect up at the top here. We're bringing in our Pokemon type. We're bringing in our definition of Pokemon card. All right, so cool. You can use that Pokemon card in an Astro context. You can use it in a React context. All good. Then we're going to go and have our query that's going to hold the data basically from this input. We're going to have the Pokemon that gets returned from the service. Whenever we change that query, we're going to run that use effect, which basically does the API search that we just created, gets JSON back, and sets that list of Pokemon. Pretty simple. All right, let's hit save, and then we got to go use this. So we'll go over into search.astro. We'll bring in our search page from the components. And then we'll instantiate it. All right, let's see, search, sour, and it doesn't work. Well, so why doesn't it work? Well, it doesn't work because, again, you need to put in that client stuff. So client, let's just say, for example, client on load. So when the page loads, load up this component, whether it's visible or not. And there we go. And type in SAUR, and there you go. It's really important to know that this client stuff is only available in .astro. So when you think about porting over your Next.js code, right, you think about how the page lays out, and you're going to want to go and lay it out so that you can lay it out in Astro, and then you can specify, okay, this part of the page is going to be static, this part of the page is going to be dynamic and client side. And if you need to talk between those components, if you've got multiple islands of interactivity on the same page, you can do that through a store, right? You could use Redux for that if you have that already. There's a really good store that's linked to on the Astro site called Nano Stores. It's excellent for doing kind of atomic state management, and it works across the different frameworks. So you can have one Nano store that is platform agnostic, and then that can actually be used by Vue code using @nanostores Vue. It can be used by Preact code using @nanostores Preact. It's really cool. It can obviously be used by React, and it's just a really nice lightweight library that gives you the ability to share state between these different frameworks. All right, well, I hope this gets you as excited about Astro as I am and about the potential of reusing your React code, but also giving you the ability to specify what parts of the page are dynamic and which parts of the page are static, and then manage the performance of your site through that mechanism. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, I will do my best to answer them in the comment section down below. And if you like the video, hit that like button. And if you really like the video, hit the subscribe button. And I will see you the next time on the Blue Collar Coder.